Good afternoon, all of you. I welcome you all to Ansarkari and a very happy new year to all of you. So in this video, we are going to discuss the newspaper, the important articles and developments for 1st of January 2023. So the first article is regarding rising women share in the MGNREGA scheme. So we are seeing that women participation is increasing and talking about the percentage share. So it stands at 57.8% in the current financial year. And talking about the best performing states, so Bihar and Uttar Pradesh, they recorded a high proportion of women shares, women workers. And talking about the states that have the highest proportion of women beneficiaries in MGNREGA scheme, then it turns out to be the states of Kerala and Tamil Nadu, and the share is 85% and 90%, so which is obviously towards the higher end, and it's a positive, a progressive development that women's participation is increasing and they are coming ahead. Then our takeaway from this article is going to be related to some reforms that you can suggest in your answers regarding the tourism policy. So firstly, we need to ensure that tourism policy or the tourist hotspots, they are women friendly. Second, we need to ensure gender balance in tourism sector. Then we need to ensure that more and more women, they participate in the tourism as tourism entrepreneurs. So these can be some reforms which you can suggest in your answers. And talking about the tribal belt in the state of Rajasthan, so you should be knowing about the districts which in which we find the tribal population. So it includes majorly the three districts of Dungarpur, Banswara, and Pratapgarh. And when we talk about the tribal welfare, so in the constitution, the fifth schedule, it talks about the tribal welfare, and you can find out about the tribes which are found in the state of Rajasthan. Talking about K9 Vajras, so government, the defense ministry, it has started the process for the procurement of 100 more units of K9 Vajra tracked self-propelled howitzers, so which are built in India by Larsen and Toubro using the technology transferred from South Korea. And they've been deployed in Eastern Ladakh in 2020, given the, we can say, standoff with China. And induction of Dhanush and M777 ultralight howitzers, they have enhanced the reach of artillery firepower on the northern borders. So these are some of the, we can say, weaponries that have been deployed across the border. And K9 Vajra is a 155 mm 52 caliber tracked self-propelled howitzer based on K9 Thunder, and it was mainly bought for use in deserts, but because of the standoff, it has been prompted that we deploy, and we have deployed them in the mountains as well. Then talking about a sustainable farming, so this is the perfect example of shrimp farming and mangroves in the state of West Bengal. So shrimp farms and mangroves to coexist in the Sundarbans. So as I said, a perfect example for sustainable farming. So a new initiative of sustainable shrimp cultivation provides hope for the mangrove restoration in the Sundarbans. So earlier it was witnessed and it became a cause of concern when it was found out that the farmers, they were practicing unsustainable aquaculture. We're talking about the Sundarban region, and they cleared large tracts to go ahead with the shrimp farming. So obviously it became a threat for the Sundarbans for their sustainability and living, and a new initiative was launched which is known as the Sustainable Aquaculture in Mangrove Ecosystem. And talking about what is the sustainable relationship between these two, so farmers, firstly, they are, while they are pursuing the shrimp farming, but they are simultaneously also planting more mangrove trees around their shrimp ponds. So this is one thing. And the second is that earlier, when they were not undertaking this initiative of planting more of mangrove trees, so they had to buy the shrimp feed from the market. But now they are using the mangrove leaf litter which provides a nourishment for the crustaceans, that is the shrimps. So that is, we can say, the sustainable relationship between these two. And when we talk about uh, the state of West Bengal, we see that shrimp cultivation is one of the key occupations of the people living in the Sundarban region. And shrimp cultivation, it is practiced in 15,000 to 20,000 hectares in India. And Sundarbans, they account for 10,000 square kilometers. And Bangladesh, or also we find Sundarbans in Bangladesh. So you need to find out more locations in India where do you get Sundarbans, and 40% of them lie in India. So 40% of Sundarban region lies in India, and rest lies in the country of Bangladesh. Then from science page, here this article, the small news piece, is talking about the rare disorders, so which are caused by deletions in the genomes of the mitochondria. And mitochondria, it is also responsible for generating energy in the cell. And this rare disease has been treated by transferring and by transplanting the donor mitochondria from mothers. So that is there. And we talk about the rare diseases. Now these three articles, they become important. So we'll be going through each one of them. So firstly, we'll be taking up this article, which is about the voting rights of the migrant population. So as we discussed, that Election Commission of India, it has come up with a remote EVMs. So this idea is basically it will be going to be implemented on pilot basis from 16th of January. Basically, it will be explained to the political parties how is it going to be implemented and how is it going to work. So talking about how significant is it going to be for the migrant population and how significant is the migrant vote. So Election Commission of India, it has admitted that the absence of a central database for the migrants population, it poses a challenge. So this is one of the challenges. So we need to ensure that the challenges that we know that are there, they need to be tackled and resolved before coming up and before implementing with this idea of remote EVMs. So we lack a central database of the migrant population in India. And again, this concern and this thing was raised when we saw reverse migration because of COVID-19. And looking at the figures given from 2011 census, so we see 45 crore Indians, that is 37% of our population. It constitutes the internal migrants. However, it is from 2011 census, so we do not have the latest figures, which becomes important for effective implementation of this idea. Then what is Election Commission's proposal of this remote EVMs? So remote voting options, talking about the other remote voting options which have been discussed before, but they have not been implemented again because of the challenges that existed there. So that includes proxy voting, postal ballots, internet voting, and early voting. So these are some other ideas which could have enabled the migrant population to vote, but they have not been implemented. And the latest idea that we're discussing about is the remote EVM. So it is going to be a multi-constituency remote electronic voting machine for the migrant voting, and it is going to be a modified version of the existing EVM model that is currently being used. So RVM, they can handle multiple constituencies, up to 72 constituencies from a single remote polling booth, and the voter will have to firstly register either online or offline with the concerned returning officer of their home constituency. So basically, the expected benefit out of this idea is that the migrant population, basically the people who are working outside their home states, outside their home constituencies, they are living in some other states and working there, so they would be able to vote from the states in which they are working, and they'll not have to move to their home constituencies to vote. And sometimes these people, they also do not obviously travel to their home states to vote. So we'll be able to secure their voting rights and ensure participative democracy. So that is, we are deliberating about this idea, and once the voter, he'll register and then he'll have to get verified, and then he or she will be marked eligible for remote voting, and a multi-constituency remote polling station will be set up in the area of their current residence. So an electronic ballot display will be shown up on such RVMs, where the voter will be voting, and the voter, when he or she scans the constituency card in the presence of the presiding officer at the station, so their respective constituency and candidates information and the list will appear on the RVM display. So they'll be having an electronic display, which is going to be a different thing from the conventional EVM machines that we are using right now. So that is the only difference that will be there, and that's how we can say a single polling booth would be able to facilitate electronic voting, basically voting for 72 constituencies using just one RPM. So what are going to be the hurdles and the challenges that we need to firstly overcome in order to ensure an effective and successful implementation of this idea is that, firstly, the opposition says that remote voting mechanism, it could seriously undermine the trust in electoral system. So this needs to be tackled, or we need to come up with any alternate solution so that we are able to, rather than, the trust depleting, and we need to ensure that it keeps on strengthening. We need to ensure that we need to strengthen our democracy over time. So this being one of the concerns, then there are fears of the misuse of the EVMs have not been systematically addressed. That is there, and this is, like, we can say, also a political issue also, which is raised in every elections that we see. And the major challenges includes, we do not have a definition of a migrant voter. So we need to come up with a clear taxonomy when we're talking about the migrant population, their data, their definition, and identifying the migrant voter. Then other issues includes the implementation of the model code of conduct in remote areas, ensuring the secrecy of voting, and appointing the polling agents at remote voting booths. So these are other issues. And what next? So firstly, this idea is going to be implemented as a pilot project in the upcoming assembly elections in 9 states in 2023. And if it is found successful, if it works successfully with desired results, so this would be implemented in the 2024 general elections. Then in this article, as we know that government has launched free food grain scheme for the beneficiaries for 1 year, that is for the entire year of 2023 under the National Food Security Act, and it would be ending the Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Ann Yojana. So we are going to discuss this topic in detail with several dimensions. So now, Center, it has decided to provide 5 kg of free food grains per month for the 81 crore beneficiaries that falls under the National Food Security Act for the year 2023. And this will soften the blow of the termination of the Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Ann Yojana. So obviously now the beneficiaries, they would be less impacted given this initiative, which was obviously meant to be temporary, and this would be withdrawn by the government. So we can say that this step has been taken by the government to ensure that the beneficiaries are not majorly impacted or with a sudden, we can say, termination of the Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Ann Yojana. So that is one idea behind this scheme. And what is the impact of this measure on the food subsidy bill? So, looking at the food subsidy bill during normal times in a normal year without COVID-19 disruption, so we see that the center's food subsidy bill was around rupees 2 lakh crores during a normal functioning of the National Food Security Act when we were functioning in normal times. So it stood at rupees 2 lakh crore. Now, this doubled in the past 2 years because of COVID-19 and because of the government launching the Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Ann Yojana. So the food subsidy bill doubled. Now, the center has taken two decisions. So the first decision is regarding free food grains under this NFSA Act for a year. Now, this would demand an additional supply of, we can say, additional supply or additional requirement of rupees 15,000 to 16,000 crores. But at the same time, when the government is withdrawing the Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Ann Yojana, so it would be saving rupees 2 lakh crores. So additional requirement is just rupees 15,000 to 16,000 crore, but it would be saving rupees 2 lakh crore with the termination of this Garib Kalyan Ann Yojana. So overall, we see that the move will relieve a major burden on the union budget. So that is, we can say, the food subsidy bill is going to decline given these two measures as they are being taken by the government. So what does this mean for the food grain stocks now? So first aspect that we discussed was regarding the food subsidy bill. Now we are talking about the stock of the food grains. So we expect more of a relief for the stressed food grains stocks because obviously the termination of the Garib Kalyan Ann Yojana, now the government it would be not facing that much of stress. And also we see that the annual food grain requirement for the NFSA, it stands at 520 lakh tons. And while for the Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Ann Yojana, the requirement was of 480 lakh tons. So that was an additional requirement apart from 520 lakh tons. And now at a time when the Garib Kalyan Ann Yojana it was launched, we saw that food grain production, the government procurement, and the government stocks, they were regularly breaching record levels. So they were making new highs. So given this backdrop, the good performance of the agricultural sector, the Garib Kalyan Ann Yojana was performing nicely, and there was not so much of concern as far as the food grain requirement and their stocks was concerned. But now in 2022, we see the situation is different. It has changed. We see that rice and wheat harvest, they have both been lower this year because of climatic events and fertilizer shortages given the Russia-Ukraine war. So India's wheat stocks in particular, they have dipped dangerously close to the required buffer stock levels. So we are seeing that wheat stocks, they have declined, and obviously we are not having a good harvest this year. So now the availability of the food grain stocks becomes a concern, and given the government has taken the decision regarding providing the free food grains under the National Food Security Act. So the central pool, it may have just 159 lakh tons of wheat as of today, and barely, which is above the buffer norm of 138 lakh tons. So earlier, even the food grains, they were like, when we talk about the buffer stocks, they were higher than the normal or higher than what was required. So at that point of time, again, as I just said, that providing food grains under the Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Ann Yojana was not, we can say, a major challenge, but now it has become one of the challenges. And talking about how it will impact the beneficiaries, so for the beneficiaries, the Right to Food campaign, it estimates that the poor families, they will now be forced to spend additional rupees 750 to 900 a month to access the current level of ration entitlement. So since the beneficiaries, they were also getting food under the National Food Security Act, under the PDS system, and also under the Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Ann Yojana. But now Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Ann Yojana has been withdrawn, so they'll not be getting the 5 kg of food grains monthly, and now they'll have to buy it because obviously they were taking up so much of food grain for the past 2 years. So that has become, we can say, a normal amount for them. So for that, they'll have to spend additional rupees 750 to 900 rupees a month. And also the ration card holders who have received this 10 kg of the grains per person a month, it would suddenly come to the half level again because of the withdrawal of that scheme. But one thing is that since now government will be providing the free food grains, so they'll be saving the cost that they were incurring when they were taking their entitlements under the National Food Security Act. So they can use that saved amount of money for buying additional 5 kg or whatever is required according to their food requirement, consumption requirement. So that is there. So it would be, we can say, it would help in balancing the impact of the withdrawal of the Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Anna Yojana. So what is the crypto awareness campaign? So the Investor Education and the Protection Fund, it will launch an outreach program soon to create awareness of cryptocurrencies and online gaming. And talking about the IEPF authority, so it was set up in 2016 under the provisions of Section 125 of the Companies Act 2013. So it's a statutory authority, and besides promoting awareness among the investors, it also makes refunds of shares, unclaimed dividends, matured deposits and debentures, and so on to the rightful claimants. So why is there a concern about the cryptos? So the crypto dilemma stems from the concerns about being unregulated currency having a destabilizing effect on the monetary and the fiscal stability of a country. So we know that cryptocurrencies, they are not regulated by any central authority, as we have like the domestic currencies of every country, they are regulated by their own central banks. However, this is not there in cryptocurrencies, and they simply function on the principle of demand and supply. So that is the only thing, and that's why their value is highly volatile. And recently we also saw that they have crashed tremendously. So that is, we can say, obviously a challenge and obviously a threat to the safety of the interest of the investors who are investing in the cryptos. So the crypto exchanges in India, they are being investigated also for their alleged involvement in unlawful practices such as drug trafficking, money laundering, violating the foreign exchange legislations, and also evading GST. So these are the concerns regarding the cryptocurrencies. And talking about the online gaming, so Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology has been appointed the nodal industry for online gaming. And for esports, the nodal agency is the Department of Sports under the Ministry of Youth Affairs and Sports. So the name of the ministries becomes important, and this can come up in PT. And talking about online gaming sector and the industry, so there is confusion about the definition of games of chances and games of skill, and a term which has been used in the Public Gaming Act. So there are risks from the cyber crimes as well. So that's why we are promoting a crypto awareness campaign along with promoting the information about the online gaming. Then from the business page, we see that manufacturing in China weakens, and it is obviously going through an economic slowdown given the spread of COVID-19 pandemic. So China is likely to miss its goal of 5.5% growth, with forecasters, they are now estimating that it might record a growth of 3%, which is going to be, we can say, one of its second weakest growth since at least the 1980s. So the contraction was the biggest since February 2022 also in its manufacturing activities. And talking about a vaccine which has been launched for the lumpy skin disease in cattle, so it has been named as Lumpy Provac, and it has been developed by the National Center for Veterinary Type Culture and ICR's different branches. So that is there. Let's take up the Financial Express. So in Financial Express, we have basically in this article, we are talking about the state of the Indian economy, and there are almost 9 dimensions that we'll be going to talk about as far as the Indian economy is concerned. So firstly, we'll be talking about the major outlook. So the balance of risks is increasing. It is increasingly tilted towards darkening global outlook. Obviously, we know that the global economy is going through a slowdown, and we have estimates that are we really heading into or heading towards a recession or not. So the global economic outlook is darkened, and there are emerging market economies. They appear to be more vulnerable So that is, we can say, the major outlook. Then talking about inflation, so inflation may be slightly down, but it is certainly not out. And inflation, it still remains a concern for the economists and the policymakers. So we are not still on the safer side as far as the inflation rates is concerned. And talking about a domestic inflation, so CPI core inflation, that is consumer price index, core inflation, it continues to remain steady at 6%. That is the towards the upper band of the safety, and the target, the tolerance inflation rate, which stands at 2% to 6%. So CPI core inflation is at 6% for the third consecutive month. And third dimension is the global growth. So OECD, it is pegged that global growth is going to be around at 2.2% for 2023, and India's growth rate, the growth forecast, they have been lowered from 6.6% to 5.7%. So even that is, we can say, not a positive picture in front of us. So inflation is not in, we can say, a safer territory. Outlook, the global outlook, economic outlook is not that positive, and global growth estimates are also not showing a positive picture. Talking about the global trade, so according to WTO, the goods trade barometer it released in November, it says that the trade growth is likely to slow down again in the closing months of 2022 and into 2023. So because the global economies, they are slowing down, so obviously the demand for imports would be declining. So that's why we do not see that global trade is going to flourish so much in 2023. Then talk about trade deficit. So India's trade deficit during the 8 months from April to November this year, it was at $198 billion, which increased from $191 billion for the whole of the year. And for this, of this, the trade deficit with China alone, it was approximately at $73 billion. So we have huge amount of trade deficit as far as China is concerned. Talking about the current account deficit, so we see that the merchandise exports, they're not performing well. Even the goods export, they're not performing really well. However, the services exports, they are increasing, and they're acting as a cushion to, we can say, the rising current account deficit. So the current account deficit, it is expected to widen this year. And the fiscal deficit, the budget for 2022-23, it promised an improvement in the fiscal deficit from 6.7% to in the previous year to 6.4% this year. And let's see how it turns out to be. And talking about unemployment, so according to the household survey of the Center for Monitoring and Economy, an all India unemployment rate on December was 8.4%. So even unemployment is not declining. And on recession, so 10-year US Treasury yield, it fell by 44 basis points in November, while the 2-year government security yield, it eased by 17 basis points. So thus intensifying the magnitude of the yield curve inversion. So basically, it has been observed in history that whenever we see the yield curve inversion happening, we see that we like always seen a recession after such events. So that's why we are, estimating that are we really heading into a recession or not on the basis of this data, that the short term yields, they are increasing, however the long term yields, they are not, or they are declining. So that is, we can say, one factor on the basis of which we say that are we approaching a recession or not. And that's it for today. Thank you for joining in Sarkari. You'll get the PDF link in the description box, and do not forget to subscribe to our channel.